Wani nakan ni tampag. Wani nakan. Wani mosquito. Ka aquani. Good evening, family. Good evening. Good medicine and peace be unto you. It's been a while. Two Hawks, Federation of Aboriginal Nations of the Americas. And it's good to be back for a bit. As you know, we here at the Federation put out videos from time to time when we see that there are particular issues that we might have some knowledge on that will be pertinent generally to individuals who are seeking out their own history, heritage, ancestry, all of that good stuff, and trying to make tribal connections as well. So just wanted to take some time this evening to have a dialogue and just share some thoughts. I'm going to title this particular video, Clearing Up 5 Misconceptions among individuals coming into understanding about indigenous heritage. 5 things we're going to clear up. And as many of you may know, Fire River and I, Chief Fire River and I, have been actively pursuing legal degrees over the past 3 years. So we've gotten a lot of internal understanding of just how things work. And one of the most key elements that I've personally learned on that journey is that in the eyes of the law, your feelings really mean nothing. Really mean nothing. How you feel, if it's right or it's wrong sometimes, really means nothing. It's about what the law says and how it's interpreted. So that's the spirit that I'm going to engage this conversation this evening. And I'm sure that some things that I say are going to make a lot of you mad. You're going to want to say that I'm this and I'm that. And that's all well and fine and good. But I'm sharing things from the perspective of the eyes of the law and what the law thinks and what the law says. And if you want to address, if you're an individual who, like the FANA member nations and their tribal citizens, were subjected to misclassification, in certain instances, enslavement and forced transportation out of ancestral lands, violation of treaty rights, theft of lands. If you're looking into that heritage and that experience, the only way you can address the atrocities that happened is through the law. That's the only way, through the law, because that's how they did it all. Everything they did was lawful. And once again, it's not about right or wrong. I didn't say it was right what they did. I said it was lawful. So we're going to have this dialogue tonight from the perspective of the law. So let's start with the first misconception. And that first misconception I'm going to state is this. There is no other proper terminology you're going to utilize in American law, in the U.S. system, to identify yourself as an quote-unquote indigenous, aboriginal, whatever you want to call yourself, and be able to enforce the rights that you say you're associated with unless you use the term Indian. That's the legal term, an Indian. That's what they were writing in the history books at the time. That's what's codified in law. So you're either an Indian or you're not. And I personally have gotten into back and forth with people about Aboriginal is the historic, all of that, and all of that sounds great, and I'm glad that you learned and you knew, but in the eyes of the law, the term is Indian. So if you're fighting for any rights, Aboriginal, autochthonous, indigenous, whatever, the term is Indian in U.S. law. It might be something else in another legal system. There's many different terms. You go to Australia, it's probably Aborigine. And that's cool, because it's still talking about the same colonial experience to folks from over there who are indigenous, Aboriginal, autochthonous to over there. But here in U.S. law, the proper term is Indian. So that's the first misconception, that you can use anything other than Indian to enforce rights. The term is Indian. And Indian's important, as I mentioned, once again, because it's historical, but also because in the eyes of the law, Indian is a political status. It's a political status, being an Indian. It's like being a foreign national. It's like being a U.S. citizen, an Indian. It means you're from the Aboriginal inhabitants that were in these lands prior to European colonization. That's what it means when you utilize the term Indian. And what we say at FANA, if you're not going to call, if it's not Indian, then you should be using the name of the nation. So personally, for me, if I'm not an Indian, then I'm a Nahiganset from Mashipag. If I'm not an Indian, then I'm a Nahiganset from Mashipag. That's the only two terms that personally I identify with in these regards when we're talking about tribal things. And then also, I'll throw this out there as well. The proper term in law is Negro, not black, not African American, not ADOS, Negro. That's what they were writing in all of the history books, and that's what the terms that were used in the law back then are. So think about that in terms of how that ties into the whole reparations conversation. There weren't any black people getting enslaved back then. It was Negroes. And once again, you can feel how you want. You can talk about the history. You can talk about the treatment that black bodies have gotten. I'm with all of that. But in the eyes of the law, those were Negroes. So if you're not claiming to be a Negro, how are you talking about anything that happened back then to Negroes? So just to bring it back, the proper term is Indian. There's no other proper term to use in the law. You have to be an Indian, whether you like it or not. Second misconception, and this one still generates conversation to this day, and I just don't get it. Just the logic doesn't connect with me. And that misconception, clear it up, Indians are not Moors. It's just as simple as the fact that there were Moors guiding Columbus's ships when they came here and they met people they called Indians. So if they were all Moors, then why would they call these people Indians? It doesn't. They were distinct groups of people. And yeah, there was from our understanding, there was definitely interaction during the colonial period between the Moors and the indigenous nations. Many nations have understandings here in the East of relations before Columbus and them came here. We definitely know up here in the Northeast, the Vikings were up in this region in the 1500s, if I'm not mistaken. And Moors were seafaring individuals. So, the notion that there was no, I think we need to put that to rest as well, that there was no interaction around the world before, quote unquote, white Europeans decided to brave the seas. Like, we need to put that colonial narrative to bed as well and explore what the connections were. I'm not going to say may have been, were, because there were connections. From my understanding and talking to the elders and, different nations, there was definitely interactions and understandings, but we're Indians here, in terms of the law, and not Moors. And that's the other thing. That's what's so outrageous. So people will read a historical document about what happened in the Caribbean or in Mexico, and then they'll start trying to tell me about things here in Rhode Island based off of what one European scholar said about Mexico. No European scholar saw all the quote unquote Indian nations that were in these lands prior to European contact. They didn't start writing about the Indians out west in the northern plains till what, the late 1700s, 1800s? That's when they started encountering the Indians out there. So, just any notion that any one European source or any conglomeration of European sources is going to capture the full diversity and complexity of the Indian nations of these lands is just outrageous. But I say all that to say this: in no means and in no way, regardless of what history you're looking at, can you claim that Indians are Moors. There's a specific group of people called Moors that were in North Africa, Spain, all in that region. Once they got expelled from there, they helped those people that expelled them come across the shores to over here. Those are who the Moors were. Not all Moors are bad. We don't have issues with all Moors, but we just acknowledge the history of it. And we find it very problematic when you find individuals, because of phenotype or because of skin tone, trying to put different identities on people or discredit other people's identities. It's all colonial behavior. So let's just clarify that misconception. Indians are not Moors. And there's a video we put out early on. I'm not going to go too much deeper into it. Go watch the video, break down why Indians are not Moors. So that's the second misconception we're clearing up. Indians aren't Moors. The first one is that the proper term is Indian in law. It's a political status, Indian. Third, and this one, well, let me just say it, ancestry doesn't equal nationality. Because your ancestors were Cherokees, Lenapes, Blackfoot, Narragansett, that's just your ancestry. That doesn't give you any extra rights. That doesn't give you any extra protections. That's just who your people were. Your ancestry is not your nationality. Your nationality is something that is granted to you from a nation. If you wanted to go and be a citizen of France or whatever, or a national of France, you'd have to go and ask France for permission. That's why when quote-unquote illegal immigrants come here, they get kicked out of the U.S. They don't have permission to be here. So, and they might have blood family that lived here. Any argument, but the point being is that their ancestry is not going to equate to them being a part of that nation. Ancestry and nationality are separate things. So having Indian ancestry does not equate to any foreign national status. It doesn't. It's wonderful. First and foremost, much respect and honor to everyone who now knows who their family is, who knows who their ancestors were. Much respect, and you deserve, because I know for a lot of us it's hard work and it's time and effort that put in. But we got to be clear here. That's not something to want special acknowledgement for. That's the bottom line. Everyone's supposed to know who their ancestors are. We've just been so colonized that we got to the point where we didn't even remember who our ancestors were. But now we know. So now what we should be viewing that is, now that you know who your ancestry is, now you're caught up to speed. Now you're at ground zero. Now you're at ground zero. Now that you know who your Indian ancestors are, and you're honoring them, now you're at ground zero. There's nothing special that's going on. There's nothing different that's going on. You've caught up to where everyone else in the world is. Everyone else in the world knows who they are, except for the folks who are calling themselves colors in European terms. So when you find your ancestry, your Indian ancestry, yes, it's great to celebrate and it's great to acknowledge, but please don't put on airs of arrogance or superiority when you talk to others because you now know who your ancestry is. You're supposed to know who your ancestors are. You're supposed to honor them. You're supposed to acknowledge them. You're supposed to learn from the lessons that they lived with their life. That's what the 7 generations concept comes from. You're here now because of the 7 generations that came before you. You're here now to prepare for the 7 generations coming after you. Nothing you have right now is yours. It's borrowed. You're borrowing from the future. So what are you doing to upkeep it so that when they get it back, it's perhaps in better shape than when you got it? And most of us aren't doing that at all. You're thinking all about yourself and what you want to do and what you're going to be. Completely colonized mindsets. And along with that goes this notion that somehow knowing who your ancestors are makes you super powerful and superior to people. No, it makes you a functioning, capable individual who is more whole than you were before. And ultimately what you should be doing is thanking Creator that you've been able to snap out of that colonial spell that was on all of us, a lot of us, of not even wanting to know and honor our ancestors. If we take a look in the mirror, it should really be shame. Shame that we were at a point where we didn't know our ancestors. So we should feel appreciative to Creator that if we didn't have that, we have that knowledge now. So that's the third one. Indian ancestry does not equate to foreign national status. All it does is it means you're a functioning, normal human being or more normal person that can now start to assess the world around them in a more effective fashion. So let's recap. First, the proper term is Indian. From the historical perspective and from the lawful perspective, because Indian is a political status. Morton v. Mancarry. Sorry, forgot to mention that earlier. You can look that up. Morton v. Mancarry. That's where it determined that Indian is a political status. It's not a racial designation. Secondly, Indians are not Moors. Did a whole video on it. There were Moors that came over on the ship from India with Columbus. They're from North Africa. This isn't Morocco. This isn't. There were nations here, Indian nations, and they weren't under Morocco. So Indians aren't Moors. The third one we just discussed is that Indian ancestry does not equate to any foreign national status. You get nothing extra by knowing who your ancestors are. You get to be thankful that you're able to operate, like I said, like a more full and whole individual to better assess what's going on around you. But it doesn't confer anything extra to know who your ancestors are. You're supposed to. So when you know who your ancestors are, you're now at ground zero. You're now equal with others around you. You know who your ancestors are now. The fourth one we're going to look at, and this one is troublesome because I really don't know why it even became an issue, but Native American is not a racial or phenotypical anything. It has nothing to do with color, skin tone, none of that. It doesn't have anything to do with the region where the Indian tribe was at. A Native American is someone who's either not a part of a tribe at all or is a part of a tribe that contracted with the U.S. for some sort of recognition status, in which case they changed from an Indian, their political status changed from an Indian to a Native American. So my cousins down in South County, personally, the Narragansett Indian tribe, any of the tribes that are in this anywhere that are federally recognized, that ones that you might call quote unquote Negro Indians, quote unquote Black Indians, whatever that madness is, they're federally recognized. They're Native Americans. Has nothing to do with the color of your skin, has nothing to do with the hair, has nothing to do with whether you think they're Mongoloid or $5 Indians or the real original. It has nothing to do with any of that. These are all legal terms, and it's a political status. You're underneath Native American, a natural born subject or citizen of America. That's all Native American means. It's a natural born subject or citizen of America. Nothing in there about color. Nothing in there about color. And while we're here, let's also address this American thing. When you read the 1828 Webster's Dictionary, it says used to be associated with, but now it is for the descendants of Europeans. So if you call yourself an American, the original Americans, whatever you're calling yourself a European. If you refer to yourself as an American in U.S. law, you're calling yourself a European. You're a citizen of America. America in U.S. law is this U.S. So if you call yourself an American, then you're part of the U.S. system. And in which case you should be voting and you should be civically engaged if you're an American. You don't get, once again, it doesn't matter what your history is. It doesn't matter how you feel. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what happened in the law. An American is a descendant of Europeans. So we can make all, and once again, I get it. I get it. This knowledge is shocking when you find it. It makes you angry. It makes you want to do something. You want to tell someone. And I've been there. Many of the chiefs at FANA have been there. But at the end of the day, it's the law. So you can stay in your feelings, but you're going to trade your rights for your feelings. What do you want? Do you want your rights or do you want your feelings? That's what it comes down to. Do you want your rights or do you want your feelings? So, Lee, in our opinion, if you're talking Aboriginal heritage and rights, leave the American stuff alone and recognize that those Native Americans are Indians too. If their nation was here prior to the U.S., they're Indians too, no matter what they look like. I don't care how light-skinned they are. I don't care if you think that they got blonde hair, blue eyes. If they got bloodline that goes back to those original nations that were here before Europeans, they're an Indian. And I don't care if they're as dark as tar, with hair as kinky as whatever. If they got bloodlines that go back, then they're an Indian. And look at me. Wherever you're at in this color scheme that they've forced upon us and that we love so much right now, in this phenotype caste thing that we just hold on to so much in all parts now, because I'm so disgusted personally to see it take such hold here in the southeastern regions and the northeastern regions, where we're quick to talk about what the white man did, but then turn around and attack other people because they're too light-skinned. Still American nonsense. So Native American has nothing to do with phenotype, skin tone, any of that. It's a political status, just like Indian, and it's for Indians who are underneath the U.S. jurisdiction. And guess what? Everyone technically is a Native American if you're an Indian right now. Why? Because 8 U.S.C. 1401B says that U.S. citizenship is granted upon all Indians, subject to the limitation of interfering with their rights to tribal property. Interfering with their rights to tribal property, which necessitates that there be a tribe. So you can be Indian all you want. You can be Aboriginal all you want. You can be autochthonous all you want. You can be copper-colored all you want. If you're not a part of, formally, officially, been granted any sort of citizenship status with a tribal nation, you're just a Native American U.S. citizen. I know that's going to get a lot of people hot with me. I know I'm going to get called a $5 agent, all of that. And good, because that means you all are coming to have to realize exactly how outrageous y'all sound, and how just the madness that we see going on when you take the time to take off your colonial lenses and start acting and thinking like an Indian. What we really see is a lot of Americans running around claiming Indian ancestry and making a mockery of the culture and the history. So Native American has nothing to do with phenotype. It's a political status. Stop calling people Mongoloid Native Americans. Stop calling people Black Indians. Stop all that stupidity. If your bloodlines go back, you're an Indian. That's it. And if you're not an Indian, then you're your nation. So which nation are you? Tell me which nation you are. Don't tell me what color you are. Don't tell me what happened in Mexico 300 years ago. Don't tell me about DNA tests. And what nation are you? And who are your people? That's how Indians deal with each other. So let's recap, because I got one more after this, and then I'm going to close out. And like I said, this tone might be a little bit harsher than the regular ones, but we're doing this from the eyes of the law, and we're doing it because we want you all to understand. You get nowhere with all the emotion. You get absolutely nowhere. And if you really want to honor your ancestors, if you really want to, show your appreciation to Creator for you even being alive today, to be a part of any sort of struggle for rights, if you really want to do that, right? If that's really what you're trying to do, then figure out what took place to them and address it. And it's the law. The law is what happened to your ancestors. So one, the proper term is Indian because it's the historical term and it's a political status in U.S. law. Two, Indians are not Moors. I'm not going to even go into any more deeper than that. Indians are not Moors. Three, Indian ancestry does not equate to any foreign national status. It means once you know your ancestors, you're functioning like the rest of the world. Four, Native American has nothing to do with phenotype. It's a political status. So cut all the colorism and the racial nonsense alone. Everyone, no matter where you're at, you're doing worse. You're doing the worst. And there's an quote unquote African proverb. Two men in a burning house should not stop to quarrel. So just imagine how the colonial structure looks at the quote unquote Mongoloids fighting with the quote unquote Negro, quote, fighting with the quote unquote $5 Indians, and all of them doing bad. All of them doing bad. Fighting amongst each other, all of them doing bad. Native American has nothing to do with phenotype. This is the last one, and then we're going to close out after this. And Katapatush, thank you for listening tonight. And thank you for those who will hear this and take it in a good way, as we say. And in a good way is good medicine. The truth should always be good medicine to your spirit. If hearing the truth does something that makes you mad or angry in a manner where you don't want to hear it or you don't want to believe it, and not that you want to learn more about it and improve upon it, if you hear the truth and then not only get mad at the truth, but get mad at the person who's sharing the truth with you, then you're what we would call a matand, a bad spirit. See, we don't believe in all this everything's okay stuff. Wunans and matans, good spirits and bad spirits. And people make choices and decisions. So this last thing, and this is truth, once again, without having a specific and direct bloodline connection, backing it up, your claims mean nothing. So what black folk got enslaved? Did your people get enslaved? Really? Show it. Prove it. So what? Indians got genocided. Did your people get genocided? We don't believe you. Prove it. That's the law. That's the law. We don't believe you. Prove it. So you can make all of the legal arguments you want. And this is what the basis, and this is what you really all have to understand. The law is not, it's not the white man's law. It's not the white man's system. It all goes back to bloodlines. And legal things have been put in place so that people with other bloodlines could get ahead. But that doesn't mean that legal things can't be undone. But if you don't even know about it, how do you do anything? So, without specific and direct bloodline connections, any legal claims you make have absolutely no merit whatsoever. If it doesn't apply to you directly, who cares in a court of law? Who cares? You could live in a city where 50,000 Indians got killed in a battle. If you're not those Indians, that has nothing to do with you. You should go and find those Indians and support them and honor them since you're in their lands. What you shouldn't do is run around claiming to be an Aboriginal copper-colored autochthonous in their lands, demanding rights that belong to them, and then trying to dismiss them because they don't look the way you think they should. Five misconceptions we cleared up this evening. First of all, the proper term is Indian. Historically and lawfully, it's a political status. Secondly, Indians aren't Moors. Thirdly, Indian ancestry does not equate to foreign nationality. It means you're honoring your ancestors the way you were supposed to be doing. Katapatus the creator for the opportunity. Fourth, Native American has nothing to do with phenotype or skin tone. It's a political status. And if you're not with a tribe, an official tribe that exists separate and apart from U.S. jurisdiction, you're a Native American. So happy Native American Heritage Month, everyone. To all the Aboriginal, copper-colored, real skins out there, happy Native American Heritage Month. And fifth, without specific or direct bloodline connections, your legal claims have absolutely no merit, and you're going to get laughed out of court. So, please take some time, go back and look at the videos we've done in the past. Take what has been shared this evening and apply it. Apply it. Ultimately, at the end of the day, what we want to tell you is that your real goal should be to get with your family and then to learn your culture. Because in learning your culture, you're going to learn the structures and the ways that are going to naturally lead you to where it is everyone's wanting to go. You're not getting anywhere without the tribe, without the tribal nation. And you can't create new tribal nations, because then that means you're not the tribe that went through those things that you're talking about. You didn't go through anything back in the 1600s. You just got started today. And once again, your ancestry confers no special rights upon you. So just a bunch of U.S. citizens it's like a club. It's like a club when you start new tribes. It's like a club, especially if you're not in your ancestral lands. So don't do that. Get with your family. Learn your culture. Learn with your people. Wherever you're at, learn your culture. And if you're in someone else's lands, honor them. Honor the Indians from those lands if you're in their lands. Don't try to assert rights in their lands. Go see how you can support them. What do they need? If you're an Indian, that's what you would have done if you was in another tribe's territory and you were staying there. You would have went to see what they needed, how you could be of assistance with them. Because if not, you just get the boot. Maybe they'll take all your stuff from you before they kick you out their territory. Get back to being Indians. And once again, if you're not an Indian, then be your nation. If you're not going to call me an Indian, then I'm a Nehikansa from Meshipog. That's who my people are. And I love my people. And I love all of y'all out there that are doing some things to try to make sense of what's going on. So, please, let's clear up these misconceptions. As always, on behalf of the Federation, we are appreciative of everyone that checks out these videos and takes the time to just listen to what we have to say. And, Wuni mosquito kakwani. Good medicine and peace be unto you all. Peace ganache until we see again at the next time. Oh.